Greetings, Earthlings, and welcome to your weekly dose of newsy infotainment. It's Let's Be Treasonable, coming to you from the luxurious studios of Radio Titans in Los Angeles, with your cognitive dissidents on the panel this week. Co-host of the Color Therapy podcast, he's a regular at the Ice House in Pasadena, originally from New York, and now calling Los Angeles home. We are very pleased to have him on the show. Comedian, philosopher, man of color, Lenny Shelton.
Hey, yo, what's up? Yeah, so I like that intro. That's like the best intro I've ever gotten.
Oh, right. Well,
Yeah.
I'll give you the transcript afterwards, because I know you got a show coming up this week. We'll talk about that at the end of the show. And I want to say the only reason I bring up the man of color is, well, it'll come into play in the conversation we are going to be having about the first year under Trump, but also because regular panelist, the Black Voice of Reason, Mr. Timon Ship, is out this week with the flu. Yeah. Still, but I talked to him this morning. He's feeling better, but still got that rattle in the chest. So here's to a speedy recovery for Mr. Ship. And also, as regular listeners, well, you, you, that one. It's when I worked in radio, they always said you're speaking with one person. Mm-hmm. So each individual out there in the audience. You know that normally we try and go for as much diversity as we can have on the panel. Liberal women, though, this morning particularly not really available, because as we are recording I guess, second, can we call it annual now, since it's happened 2 years in a row?
Yeah, so yeah.
I think we should. Yeah. The second annual Women's March is taking place, not just here in Los Angeles, but all around the country. Mm-hmm. I think it's fantastic. My sister is attending the march in Raleigh, North Carolina, and she posted a picture of one of the protesters' signs saying, "He's so bad, even the introverts are out here today," which is sadly true. Yeah. And it has been a crazy year. We will be talking about that more, but first, with his particular insight on the first year under Trump, is our invisible panelist, the man who joins us every week through the miracle of telephony and pre-recorded sound. Always a pleasure to have him. 5-time Emmy nominee, Mr. Will Durst, with this week's Burst of Durst.
Hey guys, Will Durst here with a few choice words about our 45th president, Donald Trump, who after one full year has exhibited mastery of his office and the level of a duck-billed platypus playing a harpsichord. After 12 months, Dopey Donald has seen his problems stack up behind him like a bouquet of bombs from the Acme Company, being wafted aloft by helium balloons approaching an archery range for the easily distracted. His administration has been marked by division, derision, indecision, and lack of supervision. Confusion, seclusion, delusion, and collusion. More missteps than the last place finisher in a drunken hopscotch tournament played on cobblestones, blindfolded. In his recent book, Fire and Fury, author Michael Wolff said 100% of White House insiders believe their boss is a couple sandwiches short of a picnic, if you catch my drift. The wheel is spinning, but the hamster is dead. Snuck into the gene pool while the lifeguard was chatting up the girl who runs the hot dog stand. Has the same mental capacity that God gave a bucket of hair. And then in response, the former New York City real estate developer proved that no matter how many governments he antagonizes, family members he insults, or staffers he alienates, his own worst enemy remains himself. Attempting to stem the backlash from Wolff's book, the president tweeted, and these are quotes, that he is, like, really smart and a stable genius. A statement that can only be interpreted as meaning that he's really good around horse manure. Then he gets into a fight with Kim Jong-un over whose nuclear button is bigger, when we all know it has to be Trump. He needs it to accommodate his tiny hands. All that in just the first few days of 2018. Fasten your seatbelts, folks. It's going to be a bumpy year. For Let's Be Treasonable, I'm Will Durst.
Thank you very much, Will. And, you know, there's so much there, and there is so much to talk about.
A bumpy 3 years, unfortunately.
Well, fingers crossed it doesn't get to that. Ideally, the man with the greatest health of any president ever, which is oh so believable, will have a mysterious heart attack, which couldn't possibly have been brought on by his nightly cheeseburgers that he sleeps with or his KFC habit. I mean, I just putting it all out on the table. I certainly am not the fittest human being, let alone in Los Angeles or America. I smoke. I do watch what I eat, and get some exercise. But the one thing that I do not have, probably the healthiest thing, that Donald Trump has, is a healthy sense of denial.
Well, I'll say this about Trump. I think for the rest of us, if we ate and drank 12 Diet Cokes a day and slept 3 hours a night, we'd be dead already. You know what I mean? You got to give him some credit for living this long.
Yeah, but that's nobody compliments cockroaches. Well, yeah, sure. The house is infested. They're filthy. They're a sign of filth and just an unhealthy environment. But they do know how to live.
Yeah, but
got to give it to those roaches.
That's what I'm saying. He'll outlive us all. That's the problem.
It really is. It's. It's funny when last week when they had the false alarm about missiles heading towards Hawaii, I have to say I was, of all the thoughts that went through my head, the first, probably the biggest, the one that lasted the longest was jealousy. It's like, why does Hawaii get everything? It's just not fair. I'm originally from Chicago, and I was talking to my dad when the whole nuclear brinksmanship between these two lunatics started. And Kim Jong-un announced that that North Korean missiles could now hit the west coast of of America. And my dad, I was talking to him on the phone. He's like, "So are you thinking about moving back to Chicago?" Like, no. One of the best lines from War Games is, I would prefer, and I'm paraphrasing, but I would prefer to be spared the horror of survival. And the past year has been bad enough.
Right.
And that's, I've said this on the show before, and I'm in my 40s, so I remember the Cold War under Reagan and the threat of nuclear war that I grew up with, literally. And it's one of those things, like, back then nuclear war was scary. Granted, I am older and more jaded now, so that probably plays into it a little bit, but I think the big difference between the fear of dying in a nuclear war now versus back then is I kind of welcome it now. It's like it's not the best case scenario, but it is a viable alternative. It's like, well, on the plus side, we could all die in a nuclear war.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Is it that bad now, David?
Again, like I said, I am older and more jaded. But
has Obama's hope died already? It's only been a year.
Well, that is one thing that I think, fortunately, does still survive. That's the kind of thing that keeps us going. The belief that things could get better, that there is a brighter future. I don't know if you've seen Letterman's new show on Netflix. The first episode. Oh man, it is. I mean.
Is that why you grew this beard?
Well, they say, you should dress for the job you want, not the job you have. So I'm going for retired talk show host. But I've always been a fan of Letterman since he had the morning show on NBC. And he's just such a spectacular interviewer. So for his first episode of his new Netflix show, My Next Guest Needs No Introduction, the guest is President Obama. Yeah. And it's such a great interview, and that's, I think Colbert is finally getting there. I liked for the first, year of Colbert's show under Trump, I liked his monologues, and I think the writing is great, but it's taken him time to grow into being a good interviewer. That was always one of my big pet peeves with Leno when he was doing the Tonight Show, is you watch him interviewing a guest and you can see him just waiting for the next pre-interview question that he has a joke written for.
Jay Leno was the worst interviewer ever on TV.
He's horrible, and I'll give him props for his stand-up, and I know it's de rigueur, for comedians or alternative comedians to bash Leno for being vanilla and sawing off the corners, and just rounding everything off. And say what you will about his monologues and the comedy. His interviews were largely crap. It's as someone who's worked in radio and worked as a journalist interviewing people, my opinion, and take it with a grain of salt, interviews are all about the follow-up. You listen to your guest, and you have your list of questions to ask, but let them lead the direction of the conversation. And to have someone who has mastered that skill, like David Letterman, interviewing someone like President Obama, who is such an engaging speaker. It is just, if Letterman does not win an Emmy for the show, and I haven't seen anything beyond this first episode, it really, from the negative standpoint, it shows us what we're missing in regular late night entertainment. And not, I think Seth Meyers is great. I think Colbert's doing a great job. The other two guys, and Kimmel, I like Kimmel. As I already said, I'm in my 40s. Kimmel plays to a younger demo, and I get it. It's like, I'm not going to slam him for not being what I'm looking for. This is, we're trying to do this as a qualitative analysis of late night. But Letterman, fantastic. Definitely, Lenny, you should watch it. Listener, individual listener, all of you together. Check it out if you haven't already.
I definitely got to see it, because Letterman was always such a great broadcaster. Like, Leno may have been a better comic, but Letterman knew how to broadcast. He knew how to interview. He knew how to speak to a wide audience,
and that's the one thing that I think is great, because Letterman, he could have, Michael Moore on the show, he could have Bill O'Reilly on the show, and have, an equally interesting conversation. But it was always clear, where Letterman fell politically. But, it's like, I try to tell people, look, I know I'm an asshole, but I try not to be a dick about it. And that was the thing. Like, Letterman wasn't a dick unless he was pushed in that direction. There were, you could always tell when he wanted to go there, and like, he was like, the dog waiting at the front door for the master to walk in, and just like, oh, come on. One of my favorite Letterman interviews was when he had Justin Bieber on. And, he was messing, he was playing with him, he was being a goof, but he didn't let the walls down until because Bieber had a new tattoo, and Letterman made a comment, what are you trying to be, the Sistine Chapel? And Justin Bieber was like, I don't know anything about the 16th Chapel. And it was like, you could just see Letterman okay, now it's go time. Let's have some fun with this kid.
That's when Letterman was at his best, because he was such a good interviewer. If a guest came on and was a bad interview, would try to give him, try to stonewall him, would try to be too cool, Letterman be okay,
like Joaquin Phoenix.
And then Letterman be okay, now you're fucking up my show. Now I'm gonna destroy you.
And getting back to the topic at hand, having a president like Donald Trump, it is